Story 1. I was kicked out as a teen for false rumors spread by my brother. Years later, my parents saw my success and demanded money after they abandoned me. I am a 28-year-old female with a twin brother. Growing up, my twin brother and I experienced very different treatment from our parents. My parents genuinely seemed convinced, for some reason, that my brother was destined for greatness while I was the so-called black sheep, just because I was more interested in playing sports or making new friends than studying. They constantly compared us, which was demoralizing and bruised my self-esteem from a young age. As a child, I had to watch my brother have extravagant parties on our birthday with his friends, while I was treated like an afterthought. He often had sleepovers with his friends, while I was never even allowed to bring my friends back to our place. To be honest, I loathed every minute of my childhood. The only person in the family who seemed to care about me was my grandmother. When she visited us, she always brought me my favorite chocolates and occasionally slipped a few dollars to me so that I could treat myself later. As the years passed, this blatant favoritism for my twin brother gradually transformed into emotional abuse directed at me. My parents would openly mock my grades and belittle my hobbies. It felt as though no matter how much I tried, I could never meet their expectations of being the perfect child. Although I was good at sports, they barred me from participating in extracurricular activities, as they wanted me to concentrate only on studies just like my brother. It was frustrating, and I felt helpless as a child. Later, in my sophomore year, I got grounded yet again, and this time the crime was having Snapchat on my phone. I had done absolutely nothing wrong except, like all teenagers at my age, I had downloaded this app to stay connected with my friends. However, according to my parents, this was a huge crime and a breach of their trust, as they had forbidden me from communicating with my friends. They went batshit crazy on me and threw all my stuff around the room. They then took the doors off the hinges and told me that I would have no privacy as long as I lived under their roof. Watching my parents abuse me this way, my twin brother, instead of supporting me, made my life worse. The toxic environment created by our parents' unjust actions allowed him to exploit the situation to his advantage. He adopted a pattern of lying about me, falsely accusing me of things I never did so that he could get away with everything. If he stole something, he'd effortlessly shift the blame to me, and my parents, already inclined to believe the worst about me, readily accepted his lies. He would demean me in front of my friends at school and would make fun of my appearance. Despite this, I had a wide circle of friends at school because I was approachable and open to making connections. My twin, however, struggled socially, and he started to resent that I could talk to people while he, as an introvert, felt awkward. This jealousy reached a boiling point during our 14th birthday party when no one showed up for him on his birthday. I have no idea why his friends did that to him, but in stark contrast, my friends took me out for ice cream, and I had an overall wonderful day. This infuriated my brother further. To take revenge, my brother began to spread false rumors at school about me, where he would portray me as a spoiled brat. He would falsely tell everyone that I was allegedly physically abusing him at home. Since our parents loved him more, unbeknownst to me, he took things to a disturbing level to fabricate evidence. He would punch himself, purposefully inflicting injuries like a black eye or bruised shoulder. The next day, he would confidently walk into school, displaying the self-inflicted injuries as proof of my supposed violence, and make up stories whenever our parents questioned him about the injuries. He would lie, saying that it was due to innocent activities like playing football with his friends. The lies and his alleged black eyes started to gain traction, and people began to believe his distorted version of events. It wasn't long before whispers started circulating, and even my friends began to look at me with suspicion. At first, I noticed subtle changes. Friends who once chatted with me in the hallways suddenly became distant. Invitations to group hangouts became fewer and farther between. It was like a switch had been flipped, and people were hesitant to associate with the supposedly spoiled girl accused of violence. One day, I mustered the courage to ask my ex-best friend why things had changed between us. She opened up about how my twin brother had been spreading rumors about me. She revealed the detailed lies he had told everyone, accusing me of things I had never done. I was shocked to hear her words. The feeling was a mix of disbelief and betrayal, as if the ground beneath me had given way. My brother, someone I grew up with, was spreading lies about me, accusing me of things I would never even dream of doing. It was a betrayal that cut deep, leaving me with a knot in my stomach and a heavy heart. I confronted my brother the day after our school, but he chose to ignore me. I begged him to stop lying about me, but he smirked at me and told me that I deserved to rot alone. I was at a loss for words because his lies and behavior were starting to scare me. I wanted to talk to my parents, but I was afraid that they would believe my brother over me. The isolation stung, especially because I had always been open to making friends. It felt like my brother's jealousy-fueled lies were tearing down the connections I had built over the years. Teachers, too, began to catch wind of the rumors. It was a surreal experience, as if I were living in a parallel reality where my true self was overshadowed by the malicious story spun by my own twin. The lies had grown beyond mere teenage gossip. They were now shaping how people truly perceived me. The nasty rumor quickly reached my principal's ears, and then my worst nightmare came true. The principal immediately called me and my brother into his room, as well as our parents, so we could discuss these alleged rumors. I sat there, heart pounding, as the principal demanded the truth. I hoped my brother would finally come clean, but instead, he doubled down on the lies. He straight up told the principal that the rumors were true and painted me as this bully who went around beating him up when our parents weren't around. Couldn't believe it. Shock washed over me as my brother continued spinning this twisted story about how I was angry at him for getting more love from our parents. It was all a bunch of lies, but he stuck to his story like glue. My mom began to cry, hearing my brother's story, holding on to my brother like he was some kind of hero. My dad tried to comfort my brother, telling him that it was brave for him to speak up and that he was not going to make sure that nothing would ever happen to him. After that day, I tried to defend myself, pleading with the principal that it was all made up. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of accusations, desperately trying to swim to the surface, but my brother kept at it, insisting that I was this angry, violent person taking out my frustrations on him every day. My mom's tears kept coming as she held on to my brother, giving me accusing looks. It was like fighting against a wall of belief in my brother's made-up story. The principal reprimanded me strongly, saying the school didn't tolerate bullying and these were grounds to suspend me. I pleaded with him not to suspend me, but he shook his head, saying he couldn't just let it slide. I begged him, tears streaming down my face, trying to tell him that I didn't do anything to my brother. It hit me hard, and I started crying even more, practically begging him to reconsider. My parents, angry and embarrassed by the whole situation, dragged me out of the principal's office. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to plead my case and make them understand, but they were having none of it. We left the school, my heart heavy with frustration and humiliation. When we got home, things took a drastic turn. My dad started packing up my stuff out of the blue. I was shocked, confused, and had no idea what was happening. My mom asked him what he was doing, but he just shouted that he couldn't let me live in the same house as my brother anymore. I was crying, practically on my knees, and pleaded with my brother to tell them the truth, but he stayed cold, unmoved by my emotions. My dad continued packing my things and then threw the suitcase into our foyer. I clung to my dad's legs, still begging him not to throw me. I clung to my dad's legs, still begging him not to throw me out. It was like a nightmare unfolding. He told me that a bully like me didn't deserve to live in his house and that he would ask his mother, my grandmother, to come and pick me up if she wanted to do that. It felt like the world had crumbled beneath me. I stood there in shock, surrounded by my belongings scattered in the foyer, kicked out of my own home. Eventually, my grandmother did show up. She gathered all my things and helped me place them in the car, helping me into the passenger seat. She made sure I had my seatbelt on before walking towards my parents' front door. She rang the doorbell, and when my dad opened the door, she started to yell at him for treating me this way. With stern determination, she warned him that if he ever approached me or tried to contact me again, she wouldn't hesitate to involve the police or the CPS, since what he had done to a child like me could potentially wind up with him in jail. My mother, attempting to deflect blame, told her that it was my fault. However, my grandmother wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground, defending me, emphasizing that I was just a child who didn't deserve to be treated in such a heartless manner. That was the first time in my life I felt how powerful my grandmother was. She didn't cower down to my parents, and unlike what they believed, she trusted me. Eventually, we drove away, leaving behind my home, the only place I had ever grown up in. I can't even begin to put into words how indescribable the pain I felt during that time. I remember just crying on the bed and not eating anything, despite how much my grandmother urged me to. I told her what my brother had done, and she was shocked as well. She assured me that she believed my side of the story, and I was happy that I at least had one person who had my back. When the 10 days of suspension lifted, the prospect of returning to school felt like stepping back into a lion's den. As I entered the familiar hallways, the faces of my classmates spoke volumes. Judgment, whispers, and sidelong glances. The weight of the false accusations continued to linger in the air. Meanwhile, my brother blatantly ignored me and acted like I didn't exist. He had become friends with a few people who believed his side of the story and saw him as the victim of my attacks. No matter how much I tried to tell my side of the story to anyone, it fell on deaf ears. I was an outcast, branded with an unjust label that clung to me like a shadow no matter where I went, the classroom, the cafeteria, the corridors. The eyes that met mine were filled with disdain and mistrust. I became a loner. I would keep my head down and attend all my classes, have lunch alone in the cafeteria, and would straight go back home. I had no friends, and it felt like everyone pretty much didn't want me there. Throughout all this, my parents never once called to check up on me. My grandmother would constantly remind me that this was not my fault and that life would eventually be okay. I graduated high school with good grades and was looking forward to college, where hopefully, I would have a better life. It was only when I went away to college that I first experienced what freedom felt like. For the first time, no one was watching over my shoulders, no one was comparing my grades, and no one was trying to compete with me. I met people and formed friendships with like-minded individuals. Despite the emotional and physical scars I had sustained over the years due to my family and peers, I concentrated on putting it all behind me and enjoying this college experience as much as I could. During this time, I discovered my knack for content writing. I had always been someone who wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't sure if it would be sustainable for a long time. Hence, I decided to ditch my dream, but to earn some side money, I decided to start writing as a freelancer. I signed up on various freelancing sites which helped me secure jobs from prominent clients. This is how I slowly started building a portfolio of my work. Throughout college, I maintained this side hustle and never asked for a penny from my parents. When I graduated from college, instead of getting a corporate job, I realized that I could pursue content writing as a full-time job. I was doing quite well because of the multiple clients and the long-term professional relationships I had with them, which allowed them to rope me in for multiple projects of theirs. Having a legitimate freelancing career not only made me financially independent but also allowed me to travel the world as a digital nomad. Traveling helped heal me from my past, even though it was definitely not easy. I saved up as much as I could and took a chance on myself. Over the years, I have seen so much of the world, and yet I have so much of it left to see. The only person who I considered my family throughout all this was my grandmother, and I absolutely adored her. She was very sad when I moved out, but she understood that I needed to be independent on my own. Despite my hectic schedule, I would make it a point to be there for her whenever I could. I would visit her on the weekends, often sharing meals together or simply sitting on the porch engrossed in conversations that ranged from childhood tales to more recent happenings. On weekends, I would dedicate entire afternoons to helping her with household chores or accompanying her to the local park for a leisurely walk. Recently, I got done with one of the most important projects of my career. I can't mention the brand, but I was extremely lucky to write blogs and product descriptions for them. After the project was done, I requested the team I worked with to leave me positive reviews on my websites, which they were more than happy to do so. I then took screenshots of some of their reviews to post on my Instagram, as I knew working with this brand was a huge deal. As expected, a lot of other content writers reached out to congratulate me on my professional success and even reposted my story to help spread the word. This is how I started getting messages from strangers who also needed help with their websites. My relatives noticed this as well, and some of them reached out to congratulate me. Eventually, I was contacted by my college's principal. He had reached out to me after seeing that I was doing so well and wanted me to come to college for a seminar to talk to students about building a career as a content writer. I was quite nervous as I don't do well when it comes to public speaking, but I decided to take a chance and agreed. When I found myself standing before eager faces, sharing my experiences and insights, I felt like my life had come full circle. I spoke in my speech about the struggles I faced and how I worked hard to sustain myself despite all the hard days. It was honestly a very fulfilling experience to empower others and contribute to the growth of the writers' community. Some of my clips started going viral on Facebook groups as people resonated with it. It felt good to be finally recognized for my hard work. Last week, I was invited to speak at a local news channel. It was a show about the benefits of content writing, and they invited me to share my journey and insights with their viewers. I was a bit nervous but also excited for the opportunity. During the show, I talked about my experiences, the importance of client reviews, and how a simple appreciation post could open doors to incredible opportunities. The opportunity to reach a broader audience and inspire more individuals in the field was both humbling and exhilarating. When it finally aired, I shared some of these clips on my Instagram also, as I was proud about being invited to a TV show. This is how my relatives and cousins started finding out how well I was doing in my career. You see, because my parents never talked about me to anyone, they had no idea that I was working with popular brands and getting invited to TV shows. This is how word quickly spread within my family. I guess this TV interview must have finally reached my parents' ears also, because just a few days later, I was working on another project and had my phone on silent. When I was done with my work, I checked my phone, and to my surprise, there were 6 missed calls from my mom. I was honestly shocked to see her name on my phone, as it had been a long time since she had called me. After all those years of silence, I couldn't fathom why she was calling me. I hesitatingly called her back, and she picked up immediately. I asked her if everything was okay, and my mom started to congratulate me. My dad, probably sitting right there with mom, jumped into the conversation also. He started to inquire about my life and well-being, and I answered their questions without much thought. It didn't strike me as unusual until they began to ask how much I was earning these days. I told them that it was none of their business, and my dad replied that we were family, so I shouldn't feel shy telling them my income. I told him that I was doing well financially. Hearing this, my mom then began to say how hard their life was these days. My brows furrowed in suspicion. Basically, here is how our conversation pretty much went. Mom, we are retired now, and we have been wanting to renovate the house for a while now. It's not in the best shape, but we have no savings left. Me, okay. Mom, your success has given us hope. After watching your TV interview today, we thought maybe you could help us out by paying for the renovations. Dad, after all, we are a family. You shouldn't hesitate to share some of your earnings with us. We can really use your help. Me, are you joking with me? Why are you asking me for money when you haven't even talked to me for years? I don't know what made you decide to reach out to me. And while I appreciate the congratulations, I am not going to help you out in any way. Hearing this, my mom started saying how I was being selfish and that I needed to support them as a family. My dad also added that as my parents, they deserve to be looked out for and that this was the least that I could do. I was so pissed at this that I wanted to give them a piece of my mind. I suddenly got an idea that instead of just arguing with them, I should teach them a lesson forever thinking that they could mooch off me after mistreating me all those years ago. I told my parents that I was willing to help them if and only if they agreed to my demands. My dad curiously asked me what it was. Without hesitation, I laid out my demand. If they wanted my help, they had to publicly admit, in front of our family and friends, that my brother was the mastermind behind the hurtful rumors that had tarnished my reputation. I wanted them to humiliate my brother the same way they had humiliated me in front of everyone by believing his lies and manipulation. I wanted them to take accountability for their actions and acknowledge the pain they had caused. Hearing my impossible condition, my dad began to question the necessity of such an admission. My mom told me how this was all quite unnecessary and that we could have a private discussion without involving others, but I held my ground. This condition was non-negotiable, a prerequisite for any assistance they wanted me to offer them in the future. As the tension escalated, my dad raised his voice, asserting his role as my father, and started to emphasize that it was my duty to help my family in need. My mom, in a last-ditch effort, urged me to do the right thing and help them, emphasizing the years they had spent raising me. I couldn't help but find irony in their sudden appeal. I reminded them of the past, of the fact that they had kicked me out, and it was my grandmother who had raised me, not them. They started to get more and more agitated, but I told them firmly that if they wanted to establish contact with me and seek my financial assistance from now on, then the truth needed to be acknowledged publicly, and my brother needed to face consequences for his actions. Since this conversation, my parents have been trying to incessantly call me, but I am ignoring their calls. I am starting to regret even calling them back that day. I would like to know if I would really be in the wrong if I didn't help my parents at all. Update 1. It's been a whirlwind of a week since I last shared my story, and the support and encouragement I have been receiving from everyone has been overwhelming. It's heartening to know that I'm not alone during this time. I am glad that everyone agrees that I should not engage with my parents or even consider helping them out after what they put me through. The reason I even gave them such a condition was because I knew it was pretty much impossible for them to do it. I know they love my brother too much, and despite the fact that they might have found out by now that it was all his lies, I know they will never put him through what they put me through. Today, my brother sent me a nasty text message after my parents again tried to contact me, and I refused to pick up their calls. This is what he wrote. "Hey sis, it's been a long time since I saw you, and I can tell you that every day without you in my life has been great. I heard that mom and dad reached out to you, and you gave them a crazy ultimatum. They are never going to go through with it, you know that, right? They clearly never loved you, and they will never do anything to hurt me. I admit that I did lie about you 15 years ago, but it's been a long time since then, so stop being so selfish and try to move on from the past. You are unmarried and childless anyway, so why do you not want to help them out by paying for their repairs and renovations around the house? Do the right thing and be a better daughter." Seeing the message felt like a stab to my chest. The audacity to dismiss the struggles I had faced and the conditions I had set spoke volumes about his lack of empathy. The attempt to guilt-trip me by emphasizing my unmarried and childless status added another layer of insensitivity. His insinuation that I should prioritize their needs over my own well-being was not only offensive but also highlighted how little he thought of me. Fueled by frustration and a strong desire for justice, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands and reveal the truth that had been hidden for too long. I sat down to write an email to my parents and close relatives, sharing the painful details of my childhood and the unfair treatment I had endured while growing up at my family's house. In the email, I described the strict and oppressive environment I had under my parents' roof and how they treated me compared to my twin brother. The email also delved into the malicious and completely untrue rumor my brother had spread about me in school, which had led to severe consequences and affected my reputation. I wrote how my parents had kicked me out to the curb, and had it not been for my grandmother, I might have been dead in the streets by now. Towards the end, I asked everyone to read the message my brother had sent me. I attached a screenshot where he admitted to lying about me. It was a clear confession that I hoped would expose the lies that had persisted for too long. I sent the email just an hour ago, and I know that all hell will break loose once my parents and my brother read it. I will update you next regarding how my family reacts to my email. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and a lot of things have happened this month, as you can imagine. My family did erupt after receiving the email. My parents have received criticism from relatives who were previously unaware of the extent of the favoritism and emotional abuse. A lot of the family members reached out to me, telling me that they had no idea about all this and apologized to me for not being there for me. My brother and my parents sent me a barrage of text messages that were starting to get more abusive and violent, so I decided to reach out to a lawyer who sent them a notice of cease and desist. It basically warned them to not contact me further, and if they did, they would have to face dire legal consequences. I guess this must have scared them straight because they stopped contacting me. My grandmother thinks I have done the right thing by letting everyone know what happened and supports me 100%. She is the only person who matters to me, so I'm glad she is on my back. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update. I am happy to report that everything in my life is going well for now. Professionally, my content writing business has been flourishing. The invitations to speak at seminars and podcasts continue to roll in, solidifying my position as a respected figure in my line of work. I am as close to my grandmother as ever. I took a 1-week break from my work recently so I could spend some quality time with her. She is into gardening these days and educated me a lot about various flowers and herbs in her garden. The moments I spent with her, whether sharing meals, engaging in heartfelt conversations, or simply enjoying each other's company. The moments I spent with her, whether sharing meals, engaging in heartfelt conversations, or simply enjoying each other's company, are my favorite and cherished memories. My family has not contacted me after the letter they received from my lawyer, so I'm happy that they are staying away from me. Personally, I have started going to therapy, so hopefully I can work on healing myself. I think this will be the last update for now. Now on to the next story. Before we go to the next story, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Story 2. My sister-in-law is in love with my husband. My husband and I met each other at a ski lodge 9 years ago. I was with my youngest daughter, a female friend, and her child. There was a singing competition, and both of us were set up by our friends to enter it. Sparks flew during our duet, and the rest is history. This was the first time I caught on to my sister-in-law's disturbing behavior. After the singing competition, he and I went to a cafe nearby to chat. His middle sister Tina, who was adopted at birth, came storming up to us and demanded he come back to their group. She never looked at me and only whined when he shut her down. She ran off crying, took her sister's room key card, and locked them out, so they had to stay with the friends they had brought along for the night. Fast forward to when my husband and I bought a house together. We decided to have a nice housewarming party and invited our family and some close friends. Tina showed up in a scandalous club outfit and ignored me the entire time. She couldn't keep her hands off my husband all night and decided to reminisce about them when they were little, telling everyone just how close they were. She'd kiss him on the cheek, hug him, and touch his arm whenever she laughed. He was visibly uncomfortable, and that's when I decided to step in. At first, I thought she had a small crush on him, but with the way she was acting, it came off like she was his possessive, jealous girlfriend, and I was getting in the way of them. She was going around the entire night, reminding everyone that he used to say he never wanted to have kids, but now he's playing the role of a father to my daughter. One of my friends said she thought Tina was weird for talking about how hot my husband looked in his modeling photos when he did print work back in college, and that her favorite photo was of them at a beach in Hawaii during a family vacation a few years back. The most bizarre thing she told a few people was that he had never dated a woman of color before, and now all of a sudden he's in love. It's only bizarre to me because she's biracial, so I couldn't understand why this would bother her unless she was jealous of me because she wished she were me. Things started to go south towards the end of the night when he got down on one knee and proposed to me. Tina started crying and ran to the restroom, which left their dad to go check on her. He then drove her home because she couldn't seem to pull herself together. I knew exactly why she was upset, but my husband always equated her behavior to jealousy because she never had any healthy relationships of her own. After that tantrum, she skipped our wedding, baby shower, our children's birthday parties, and any other family events that we attended together. I was fine with extending invitations because I knew she wasn't going to show up. She had some sort of mental breakdown and was in and out of treatment for years. I wish nothing but the best for her, and I don't know what kind of issues she's going through, but I don't want her disrupting our peace. I'm currently pregnant, and our baby shower is at the end of this month. I'm holding it a few months early because I'm at high risk of going into labor earlier than other women as I did with my other 2 children. My mother-in-law called to confirm she'd be there and stated Tina would be riding with them, asking if it was all right if she brought her new boyfriend. I was surprised because we hadn't seen her in years, and while I was a bit worried about agreeing, I eventually did and hoped that she resolved whatever caused her so much distress when she was around my family. It took all of 24 hours for her to start her nonsense back up again. She texted my husband paragraphs at 3 in the morning, telling him how she felt about our family. First, she went on to say how much she missed being close to him the way she used to when they were kids, and how after I came into the picture, all I did was destroy their relationship. She asked him if he was happy with his life and reminded him that he used to say he never wanted kids or marriage. She then asked if he thought about her all this time and if he could meet up with her before the shower so they could talk alone face to face. That was the last straw for me. I asked my husband if he knew she was in love with him, and he just shrugged and said he didn't doubt my theory. Apparently, when she was 11, she asked if they could cuddle and kiss, but he said no. He admits her behavior since then has always been weird and dramatic, but he didn't pay her much attention because they had many siblings, and they all hung out together all the time. I asked him if he could uninvite her and this new boyfriend she'd be bringing because I think she's going to bring drama to our baby shower. He said he wants to talk to his parents first to see what kind of state she's been in, but I know in my gut that she's ready to ruin our day with her theatrics. Final update. My sister-in-law is in love with my husband. My husband and I decided that we needed to be completely removed from sister-in-law's drama in order for us to focus on having a healthy pregnancy and family life. Ever since my husband left Tina on read, she started calling and sending a bunch of unwarranted and degrading texts about me and our children. He sent her a long paragraph that he showed me as soon as he got home, basically telling her off and telling her that he would rather never speak to her again than listen to her talk bad about our family. He told her she would never be invited to any of our family functions and that she needed to check herself back into the hospital if she thought their sibling relationship was ever going to be any closer than brother and sister. He closed it off by saying he would let the family know the reason she was uninvited, and that he hoped she'd either see a therapist or find one immediately. Her messages had pushed him to the breaking point, with the worst thing she said being that the reason I had 2 miscarriages in the past was because me and my husband don't actually belong together and that my body couldn't handle carrying any of my children to term because it wasn't meant to be. I expected her to bring something like this up, but I could tell it really hurt him, and that's why he didn't hold back from her. He then blocked her and told me he was changing our phone numbers as soon as possible. He called his parents and the oldest of his sisters whom he's close to and explained to them why Tina would never be allowed to visit our home. He shared all of their text exchanges and they were mortified. He asked them not to share our address or our new numbers. They assured us that none of them planned on sharing this information with her. They then proceeded to tell us that she actually asked for my husband's work schedule and mentioned driving up a day early to surprise him. My father-in-law said he always knew Tina had a little crush on my husband, but after her outburst at our housewarming years ago, they had a conversation about her behavior, and she told him that she had been keeping a diary about him since she was a teenager. She explained it was to process her emotions and to challenge negative thoughts, but all I got from it was that she had written about my husband for years. Apparently, she only stayed away from my husband because my father-in-law kept her in check and was able to get her hospitalized several times for being a threat to herself and others. My husband's family told us they would deal with her and apologize for thinking she had resolved her issues. Someone pointed out to me that Tina is potentially dangerous and could hurt me or our children, and this really scared me. My husband is going to upgrade our alarm system and add more cameras. I don't work summers and will most likely be out on bed rest by the time I have to go back to work. So he wanted to ensure the kids and I were safe when he's away from home. We live about 5 hours away, so she would really have to go out of her way to show up here if she somehow found out where we live. I'm hoping that this is the end of the entire situation and we never have to see Tina ever again. But I also hope that she's able to get the proper help she needs because she's clearly disturbed. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My golden child brother is demanding I let him propose at my wedding, and my grandmother is supporting him. After my grandmother threatened to make up rumors and expose me if I didn't let my brother propose at my wedding, I kind of froze. My grandmother is a narcissist and is exceptional at putting on a show to gain some sympathy. However, a brilliant idea popped into my head, and I bluffed, telling her that I had been recording this call and had no problem playing it for everyone in the family to hear. She was the one that now froze, and ultimately she begged me to reconsider. Once again, I told her no and hung up on her. Side note. My grandmother has always sided with my brother and believed his lies no matter what he did, even buying him literally 5 times more presents during the holidays. Anyway, the next day, I ended up speaking with my brother again and threatened to tell his girlfriend if he was still intending to propose at my wedding without permission. He took it poorly and called me an awful person, so I pointed out that my wedding wasn't about him. Actually, my parents had started siding with me by this point too, and our parents were there for this and they backed me up. I think my brother did a double take when they did that. My dad pointed out that he'd raised my brother wrong, and that was on him, so from now on my brother was to show them real respect, and they wanted to get an official lease drawn up for him to pay proper rent and utilities. He was only paying them $300 a month without contributing to any utilities or food, and if he didn't want to pay, he could move out, and they'd rent his room to someone else. My brother turned to our mom for help, but she just agreed with Dad. He looked like he was having a conniption and then left the house. He came back a couple of hours later but spoke to no one and locked himself in his room. 2 days later, my brother announced he was moving in with Grandma because she invited him, and our parents basically told him that if he wanted to live with her, then to go ahead. My brother responded to this by saying we all hate him for just wanting to propose to his girlfriend. My parents pointed out that it's not that he wanted to propose but where he wanted to do it, and he'd get no support for it. He's refusing to talk to our parents now. My grandmother did try to call me again, but it ended up with me telling her that my brother would not be allowed to propose at my wedding, plain and simple, so he could get over it or not come, and the same goes for her. I ended up calling her out on her favoritism towards my brother since we were kids, which she tried to deny at first but couldn't keep doing so because of how much I'd pointed out. She ended up crying again while I told her that if she kept trying to insist on this, then she wouldn't be coming to my wedding. She begged me not to rescind her invitation but still said she didn't understand why I couldn't let my brother have his way before ending the call. My fiancé is 100% on my side and is fully ready to remove my brother and grandmother from the wedding. My grandmother hasn't called again, and she's not talking to my parents either. My guess is my brother went crying to her again to tell her mommy and daddy weren't enabling him anymore, so she offered for him to move in with her, but there's literally nothing she can do to sway me, and I think my last conversation with her made her realize that. I didn't wish to tell my brother's GF, but she called me up on a Saturday about whether my brother plans to propose to her during the wedding because he drunkenly babbled to her about his plan. I told her yes, this was true, and she ended up tearing my brother a new one, and he still tried to justify himself to her. That's when she told him they were through and cut all contact with him. My brother, of course, blamed me. He showed up at my place one more time to have a fit and said he was boycotting my wedding. He actually thought he had leverage that he and Grandma wouldn't go. I said I wouldn't miss him and that he's in his 30s now and needs to grow up. Our parents have cut the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him, and they're already repainting his room to rent it to someone else. That made my brother just shut down and leave. Update. Well, my brother and Grandma are officially uninvited from my upcoming wedding. My grandma called me again to berate me even more for refusing to let my brother propose. Apparently, he's beside himself with grief over his ex. So beside himself with grief that he's already on Tinder looking for a date, or so his social media says, which I pointed out to Grandma. She claimed that was just his way of coping. I said I didn't care. He's no longer invited to my wedding because I can't trust that he won't do something crazy if he's there. Then she gave me her classic line of, "I don't understand why." That's what she always says when I won't do something for my brother after he'd screwed me over. For example, I once gave my brother a loan back when he was still doing online college. He didn't want to repay it despite promising he would, even after getting a good job. He hemmed and hawed about it when I wanted him to pay me back. He had the money, he just didn't want to give it up, so I said I was never going to loan him money again, and Grandma gave her line of not understanding why, even when I told her it was because I knew my brother would never want to repay me, so he's not going to get another penny. Her response was to say she still doesn't understand, so just hearing her say that about the issue of my brother being banned from my wedding made me lose it. I yelled at her that she does understand. She just acts like she doesn't because she doesn't want to. She's always been on my brother's side no matter what he did. And because of that, she's no longer invited to my wedding either. And I don't care if she cries because I'm just plain done with her. She made her bed with the side she chose. Now she can live with it. Of course, she exploded in tears, crying like a sad whale, and called me a bad grandson. I said she was a bad grandma for thinking I was the bad grandson when she always believed my brother's lies and played favorites. Everyone else knew it too. I then told her not to call me again unless it was to admit the truth and give me a genuine apology, and then I ended the call. It went right back to radio silent from her. I also preemptively told my parents about what happened, And their response was that they didn't care if I yelled at her anymore because she was never going to stop siding with my brother no matter what. My parents are actually doing so much better since my brother moved out. They've got 2 rooms ready to rent out and on the market, waiting for a tenant. My dad is also working on clearing out the attic to make another room up there for someone to rent. They're basically turning as many rooms in their house as they can into livable spaces. They're going to need that rent money to help pay off their debts, and they're still thanking me a lot for helping them with the money I've been sending monthly. My parents sat me down a while ago and apologized heavily for everything that went on from my childhood till now. They said they could offer no good excuse as to why my brother was the favorite when they shouldn't have been playing favorites at all, and that what they did was completely unacceptable, and the fact that I was still willing to help them out even after everything they'd done made them realize how horrible they were as parents, and from now on, they'll do their best to be better people. They've basically stopped caring about what my brother and grandma think too. They haven't been talking to them either. I've heard nothing from my brother's ex. She wants nothing more to do with my family, and I don't blame her. My fiancée is super happy about me standing my ground because she wanted my brother and grandmother out much sooner. Then she admitted something to me I never knew. Apparently, the few times she was alone with my grandma, she was told all sorts of lies about me that my fiancé never once believed. She couldn't recall much, but basically, grandma said a number of things that I remember my brother did that were pinned on me. But the gist of it is that my grandma was trying to tell my fiancé that I was a bad egg as a child and that she better watch me closely in case she decided not to marry me. So yeah, grandma was trying to poison the well with more lies. The fact that old hag was still lying to people like my fiancé when I'm not around infuriates me. So I'm beyond glad that I've cut the tumors that are my brother and grandmother out of my life. I don't need them anymore. Update 2. Well, my brother came pounding on my front door again a few days ago, and this time he was drunk. He vomited on my porch step and then did something I didn't see coming. He curled up on the ground, crying. I figured he was going to attack me or something because he was acting so deranged, but instead, he just got in a sort of fetal position and cried in the grass while blaming me for his problems, in between swigs from the bottle he was carrying. He tried to get back with his ex and went over to see her to beg her, but she shut the door in his face. Afterward, he pounded a bottle of vodka while walking over to my home, since I only live a couple of miles from my grandma's house. While he was sitting on the ground, he was drunkenly cussing at me and saying it's my fault that everyone but grandma hates him now. I had no sympathy and told him he did all that himself, time to grow up and man up. He called me a few more things that I could barely understand and then pretty much stopped talking to just sit there and keep drinking and crying. I ended up taking away what was left of his bottle of vodka and said that maybe when he's sober, he can see some common sense. Then I called for a taxi to take him home. I wasn't about to drive to grandma's house because I didn't want to see or be anywhere near her. My brother didn't even thank me for calling and paying for the taxi, just flopped himself into the back seat and told the driver to get going. I got a call the next day from the taxi service stating my brother had vomited multiple times all over the back seat in the short time he was in the cab, and it took $200 to thoroughly clean it because it was everywhere. I apologized and mailed them a check for their trouble. It's been a few days since that happened, but the crap didn't end there, so I'll be making another post very soon. Update 3. My grandma and my brother were already both uninvited for my upcoming wedding and borderline ghosted, but now she's gone and made a huge scene about it. She took my brother over to my parents' house and laid it on thick to my parents about how I was treating her and my brother. Well, this next part one never expected. My mom, ever the passive doormat to her mother for as long as I can remember, finally lost it on grandma about how she's a narcissist and how her influence made her and my dad seem like ones too, and they were idiots to let that happen. Then they told grandma and my brother that the whole wanting to propose at my wedding thing was a completely stupid and selfish idea. Then my parents told them both to get out. My brother especially looked disheartened because he'd used them as a veritable ATM for years and barely contributed financially after landing a good job. Grandma, I'm told, left in hysterics, and my brother was silent most of the time. Grandma called me again to yell at me. I let her have her rant while my fiancé and I just let the phone sit on the coffee table while on speaker mode. After a while, Grandma realized I wasn't saying anything back and yelled at me to speak to her. But I told her that she's a coward who thinks she's in charge, but she's not and never will be. She can't boss me around. She has nothing to leverage over me, and she always acts like she doesn't understand my reasoning when I know she does. but she doesn't ever care to admit it. Then I called her out on the lies she spewed about me to my fiancé, which Grandma immediately denied. But then my fiancé spoke up and said she told me everything Grandma had said to her, then asked why she would do that. Did she not want me to be married and be happy or something? And that's when it came out. Grandma yelled that she was ticked I am getting married before my brother. She'd wanted to see him married first because older and her favorite grandson. And she believed the least I could have done was let my brother try to save his relationship by proposing at my wedding. I said that wasn't trying to save a relationship. That was trying to trap that poor woman in one by hoping she wouldn't say no in front of a crowd. But I've already spoken to my brother's ex before she cut contact with all of us, and I know for certain she'd have said no to him anyway. I then asked her if the roles were reversed, would she say the same thing to me? I then completely went off on her without responding. The words old hag, fossil, chocolate SpongeBob meme, an artifact, and a narcissistic self-absorbed ancient beach were used. Then all I could hear on the line was Grandma loudly sobbing, and my brother trying to console her. He didn't say anything to me, and then the phone hung up, either by him or her, I don't know. Update for, well, my grandma went mental. Apparently, after I told her off over the phone about a month ago, she went off her rocker even further and actually lashed out at my brother, which is something I thought she'd never do with how much she loves and enables him. After about a week, a neighbor heard a commotion in her house and ended up going to check on her, and she attacked the neighbor over it. Police were called and took Grandma into custody for a psych hold due to apparently how manic she was. My parents went in to see her, but visitors weren't permitted until the 3 days were over, and when they were, my parents met with her. She was hamming it up, playing the victim, and trying to get my parents back on her side. My mother said Grandma was still blaming me and also saying that she still had a right to be at my wedding. Well, my mother let her have it by saying that she lost that right after everything she said and did. All the lies and gaslighting and being mad at me for something as petty as getting married before my man-child older brother that she outright said was her favorite grandson. Meanwhile, my brother was chilling in her house because he had it all to himself until my grandma was allowed to return home. Also, my wedding finally happened. The outdoor venue my wife and I picked was beautiful. There was a good-sized man-made pond with paddle boats and plenty of wild ducks and frogs, though the ducks came right up to people begging for food. We brought some loaves of bread so the kids in the family could toss some to the ducks. Yes, I did have security there, but no, she didn't actually show up. Instead, she was busy taking things out on my brother because apparently, she has gone insane on him now. I know this because he sent me a letter since I have him blocked on everything but snail mail. I got the letter after coming back from my honeymoon. It was a letter with a mix of apologies and blaming me. He said he was sorry for wanting to propose at my wedding and saw how crummy it would have been to try that, and that I was right about him being underhanded and trying to ask his ex to marry him in front of so many people, but then said he was angry he didn't get to go to my wedding because I couldn't overlook his traumas. Then he said he was sorry for letting Grandma treat me the way she did for so long because now he's getting some of that himself. He then blamed me for getting Grandma so worked up in the first place over yelling at her and then not letting her into my wedding, then went on to blame me for our parents kicking him out of their house and being stuck with Grandma because she's driving him up the wall, so now he's apartment hunting. He did apparently ask my parents to move back in with them, but they outright refused and told him to get his own place, and that's about it on that. Update 5. At first, my brother and grandmother only got worse. My grandmother turned into a crying wail again when my brother told her he was moving out. Then he had the gall to ask for mine, and our parents helped to move his stuff because Grandma was saying she wouldn't let him leave. But our parents just reminded him of what he'd done to end up in his current situation, and rather than act like a rational human being, he decided he'd do just the opposite. He blamed me for ruining his life again, and my father told me he actually busted a gut laughing at my brother when he said that, then laid into my brother over how he was blaming his own crap on me, and my 30-year-old brother curled up in a chair crying. He refused to leave our parents' house that night and stayed curled up on the couch with a bottle of booze until the next day, in which he was kicked out by our parents with a raging hangover. Our father told him he needed to apologize to me face to face, and that they'd no longer consider him their son if he didn't. It took my brother a couple of days, but he showed up at my place with a piece of paper in hand and read out an apology he'd pre-written. He said he was so sorry for everything he's done. He's been a crappy person and an even crappier brother. He looked for any way he possibly could in his own head to make me the bad guy, but the excuses just weren't there anymore. He can't ever undo the things he did. But he wants to move forward and try to mend our relationship as siblings, starting with getting out of Grandma's house. He told me he understands why none of us want to be there, and that he'll hire help. We ended up shaking hands and having a hug, and thus far, he's actually been working hard to improve himself, even cutting down on his drinking by a lot. As for my grandma, she did try to keep my brother from moving out, and she refused to let the movers he hired in. He had to get the help of a police officer to keep her at bay. They only had to move out 1 room's worth of stuff, and with the movers and my brother working at it, they got all of his stuff out of there in record time. My grandma ended up threatening to unalive herself while he was leaving, or so my brother said, but I'm pretty sure that was the exact truth because she did actually try, but in the most attention-seeking way possible. She took a bunch of meds and then called 911 on herself. They took her to the hospital and got her stomach pumped, which was a bit redundant as she'd thrown up before the ambulance even arrived, but they wanted to be sure. My parents ended up getting APS involved as Grandma ended up on another psych hold, only this time in a hospital bed. During her stay, they did several tests on her because she avoided doctors for years, and she was found to be in bad health. Her kidney function was low, her lungs weren't in very good shape, and she was at heavy risk of diabetes. So Grandma had to be put in a care facility for her own health and safety. It actually didn't surprise me much. She was a little woman but had some weight on her, and all her teeth had to come out when she was in her 50s because the only thing she would drink was soda, and she ate garbage. She also used to be a heavy smoker in her younger years, and I guess that did some lasting damage to her lungs. She'd been having breathing trouble for some time but somehow hid it from us all. Doctors found that she needed to be put on oxygen, and that she couldn't live alone anymore. She wanted my brother to come back and become her full-time caregiver, but he refused and said that he just can't. He's got his own life to live, and he's got a lot to make up for with the rest of us. Well, my grandma went crazy crying and throwing things in the hospital while screaming at us all to get out. After she was out of the hospital, my parents worked to have Grandma put in a care home. They moved a few of her personal belongings into a room there to try and make her more comfortable, but that didn't really do much of anything. She was there all of a week and said she was incredibly miserable. All the employees treated her like a child, and she had to have an oxygen breather attached to her at all times. She also said she hated being there because, in her words, the place was filled with old people, and she hated being reminded that she's old too and would rather be alone. She was there nearly a month before trying to unalive herself again by refusing to wear her oxygen breather and saying she'd hang herself with the tubes. They had to put her on close observation 24/7, which only made her even more miserable. Each time we saw her, she begged us, even begged me, to take her out of that place. She missed her home and she missed her old life, but she wasn't going anywhere because she was considered a danger to herself. Well, eventually she just seemed to accept her fate that she would spend the rest of her life living in the care home, and my grandma pretty much just shut down. She became that bitter old woman who hardly talked to anyone. We paid her regular visits, but she was never happy to see us, me especially, and the months just blurred together with this routine. Things seemed to change a little when we told her my wife was pregnant, and she perked up at that. My wife reluctantly let her feel her belly when we visited, and that seemed to make her day, if anything. It made Grandma a bit nicer to all of us, but she was generally still her mean old self. Then some time ago we found out Grandma passed away. The funeral was a bit lackluster. My mother was really the only one who cried. Most of us were just really quiet the whole time. And then we had a small family reunion at my parents' house. It was mostly just awkward conversations, as a lot of us didn't have much good to say about her, and she'd already passed away, so what good would it do any of us to talk about how toxic of a person she was in life? Either way, so there wasn't much to do but stand around and get drunk we did, but it was more like a party full of sad, quiet drunks. Everyone dressed in black and gulping down beer or wine. Anytime someone wanted to do something fun, it just got really awkward till they shut up or decided to stay quiet or leave. And my wife wasn't there since she stayed home after the funeral because she couldn't drink and didn't want to be surrounded by people drinking. My brother is showing some genuine improvement. Grandma was his biggest enabler, and she's no longer with us. He applied for therapy last year to try and better understand himself and make a better effort to change. For now, he's trying to help out our father with remodeling the attic in his spare time, and things are still awkward between us anytime we see each other right now. I can't say how things will go in the long run at all, but without Grandma's toxicity, hopefully, everything will change for the better. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My entitled mother demanded I hand over my house to her because my little sister is pregnant and needs it more than me. I, 31, have a sister, 28, who has honestly been the golden child to my mother, but not my father, for as long as I can remember. My parents divorced when I was a teenager because my mother cheated with an old high school ex-boyfriend, and she has always been controlling, manipulative, and narcissistic. And sadly, my sister was like her little mini-me. Our mother also seemed to believe she had total authority over me anytime. She'd snap her fingers and order me around like a dog. It was demeaning, and my sister always backed her up too. So no surprise, I went to live with my dad full-time after our parents split, while my sister stayed with mom. The two of them were very alike and both pretty much stopped speaking with my father unless it was about money. Though I'm more like my dad. My father was very business-oriented and started teaching me how to do his line of work as soon as I was 16. I got pretty good at it, and after 12 years of working for my father, I was made a partner in his company. Things were great, but then about 8 months ago, tragedy struck. My father had become somewhat immunocompromised due to being a heavy smoker for much of his life and died at only 60 years old after he caught the virus. I met my mother and sister for the first time in years after we had a socially distanced funeral for my father over a video call. My father was cremated by his own request and buried in a local cemetery, so there was no body or casket. My sister seemed to grieve, but my mother looked indifferent the entire time, though I honestly was not surprised. The last time she saw my father, she screamed at him that he owed her more money and then threatened to sue him, to which he just laughed at her. He'd paid alimony and child support as long as he was legally mandated to, and no more than that, and he even put $30,000 toward my sister's college fund. But 10 years after the divorce, he was no longer legally required to send mom money anymore because of the judge's ruling, and she's by no means broke. She works the same job she has had for nearly 3 decades, fully owns the old family home we used to share, and even rents out 2 of the rooms in it to Airbnb regularly. She's by no means hurting for money. Sometime after the funeral, my dad's will was read. Apparently, he'd figured that if his heavy smoking didn't eventually do him in, something else would, and even joked about it in a pre-recorded video. I was pretty much willed nearly all of his assets, including most of his money, to his business and home. He left my sister a car, a 2015 Nissan Altima, and about $10,000 in cash. My mother only got $1,000 and a few other items that she'd been claiming were rightfully hers since the divorce. Beyond that, I got the rest, and my girlfriend now lives with me in the house my father passed down to me. My sister pretty much went from finishing 2 years of community college to living off her boyfriend and only working part-time online for several years. During that time, she got pregnant but suffered a traumatic miscarriage. I wasn't aware till after the funeral because we were practically no contact, and no one else told me. When lockdown hit, her boyfriend's job started downsizing little by little, and eventually, he was only able to stay on part-time, which hampered their finances to the point he was finally telling her she needed to look for better employment as well, since he was trying to find a second job, and then she got pregnant. She claims she and her boyfriend were careful but calls it her miracle baby. One evening, I got an unexpected knock at my door, and when I answered, I was unpleasantly greeted by both my mother and sister. They both walked right in without even asking and made themselves comfortable in my living room. My girlfriend and I shared a look of confusion, and I asked why they'd come by. My sister was giggling and looking all over, opening doors and seemingly giving herself a tour of my home. My mother had just plopped herself down on my sofa and snapped her fingers while demanding cold bottled water. My girlfriend got the water for her, and I asked what they were there for. My sister seemed all giddy and just ignored me to continue snooping around my home, and before long, I heard her yell from down the hall, "Mommy, it's perfect." Yes, she still calls her Mommy. My mother finally spoke up and said, "Well, I think it's time to do your brotherly duty." To which I was like, "What?" My mother then proceeded to say, "Now that your father has passed, this house should have gone to me since I was his only spouse, but you can still fix this. You make plenty of money and could just buy a new house. Your sister needs this one so much more since she's the one with a baby on the way. But if you're so determined to stay, you could just keep to one room and cover all of the bills until you decide to move out. My girlfriend and I, having read enough Reddit to know exactly where this is going and how it'd play out if I let it go on, so I guess you could say we were mentally prepared. I took a deep breath and stated aloud, "That's not effing happening. You don't order me around, especially not in my own goddamn home. Yes, I make plenty of money, but like Dad, I'm gonna save it for when I really need it, not that you care." My mother started snapping her fingers at me like she used to and loudly stated, "Stop! I am your mother, and you will do as I say because I brought you into this world, and I'm the one in charge here. And as far as you're concerned, I am God. That means when I say jump, you say, how high? This house is rightfully mine, and your sister will live here. Consider this your formal eviction, but since I'm gracious, I'll give you 2 weeks to pack your bags and transfer the deed to me." In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this can't be real. But then I just grabbed my cell phone and started dialing. My mother quickly stood up and yelled, "What are you doing?" And I retorted, "I'm doing what I should have done as soon as this crap started. I'm calling the cops to get you out of my effing house." She started swiping at me and managed to knock my phone out of my hands. Then she proceeded to try and stomp on it, but I was quick enough to snatch it up before she could. "That's it. If you don't leave, I will force you out myself." My mother proceeded to slap me across the face, and I returned the favor twice as hard, backhanded. So much so that I ended up knocking her back down onto the couch. She held her hand over her reddening and smeared makeup face in total shock and then yelled, "How dare you!" I went back to dial my phone and said that if she didn't leave, I would have the police come and remove her by force. My sister came barreling in between us, holding her arms out and saying that I should just do the right thing, for once in my life, and be a good big brother. I snapped and said, "Oh really? I'm the bad sibling? Last I checked, I was the one who's had to work for a living since I was a teenager. I had to do all the chores in the house while you just sat on your butt playing video games or talking with your friends all day. And you used to steal my hard-earned money just to go out shopping after you spent all of your allowance. You're a complete mooch and thief, so I don't owe you crap. Now both of you get out before I decide to dial this last number." My sister started to tear up, crying like a baby, and said, "Mommy, make him stop." My mother began hugging her and kissing her cheeks while giving me a death glare. Then she seemed to think she'd gotten smart and said, "You know, if you do call the police, I can just tell them that you hit me. And who knows, I could maybe say to everyone you wanted to do a lot worse to a poor pregnant girl in need. I don't think that'd be a very good thing for you." I cut her off with a raised hand and said, "Just stop. If you haven't noticed, my girlfriend over there has had her phone out recording almost this whole time, and that means we have recorded evidence of you assaulting me first and openly stating you'd lie to police. I don't think that'd be so good for your reputation at your job or your little Airbnb if it leaked online." My mother would have blown up like a tactical nuke, but she quickly deflated and started dragging my crying sister out by the arm. My sister was somehow acting like a complete toddler and broke loose of our mother's grip to sit down on my porch step and have a tantrum. I just gave my mother a look and said, "Do you see now? This is the result of the spoiled way you raised her." She glared at me again, and then I was treated to a show of my mother trying to drag my sister off of my porch steps, but she latched onto the porch handrails and kept saying, "You promised me," over and over again. I let out a cackle and told them both from the door, "Never come back." My mother flipped me the bird and then went back to trying to drag my sister off the porch. It took a few minutes, but she finally got my sister to get up and leave with her by saying, "He's a cruel, heartless bastard who will go to hell for this." I laughed some more and said, "There's also a special place in hell for liars and narcissists who try to manipulate others to get their way." My mother clenched her fists and was about to say more when I just held up my smartphone again with it recording and said, "The clock is ticking, Mom. Get off my property." My mother then walked my sister to the car, gave me one last snooty look, and drove off. I thought that was the end of it, but letting things go was never something my mother would do. After a few days, I started getting messages from people I know and some relatives online. A lot of them were furious with me, but others just had questions about what was going on. I tried to check my Facebook, but couldn't see anything they were saying because my sister and mother both blocked me on their social media. But my girlfriend could still see everything because they kept their profiles set to public. We screenshotted everything and then printed some of it out. Both of their profiles had posts that called me a greedy, heartless bastard who stole the house that was meant to be my sister's inheritance right out from under her by paying off the lawyer who handled Dad's will, which is a complete and utter lie, and they both know it. I called my lawyer, who was also my father's lawyer and a trusted family friend, and gave him copies of all the screenshots from Facebook and the video my girlfriend had recorded the day my mother demanded my house. He wanted to just write a formal cease and desist, but I wanted to take it further than that. He sent them a letter I told him to write via express mail that had to be signed for, so I know they got it. My mother called me in an absolute fury the same day the letter was delivered. I told her that if she and my sister didn't redact all of the untrue social media posts they made about me and tell the absolute truth, I'd send all of the information I have to the whole family, her boss, and upload the videos we'd recorded of her online, and then I'd sue her on top of it. She called me unreasonable and that she just did what she did for my sister's sake, and then went into a full-blown lecture reiterating her belief that my sister still needs my house more than me. I bluntly stated I didn't care what she thought, and if she didn't redact everything and tell the truth, I'd make sure her career would be over. She begrudgingly said, "Fine, you win. Have it your way and keep the effing house," before hanging up the phone. That very evening, all of the lying posts disappeared from both their profiles. I was unblocked, and my mother gave me and everyone else a half-assed apology, claiming she jumped the gun with everything she said because she thought my sister needed my house more than me because she's broke and pregnant. But the house was rightfully mine according to my father's will, and she knew that even before my father passed away, so she had no right to try and claim it. As for my sister, she also apologized, but more or less just parroted everything our mother said while claiming she just went along with her ideas and then blamed what she did all on her mother and her pregnancy hormones. The replies poured in for some time on both my mother's and sister's profiles. Many were furious with them for trying to take my house. I got a lot of sorry and my bad messages from those who'd previously believed her, but all it really did was show me who was more on her side, to begin with, since they were all believing her nonsense so quickly. They were mostly people from her side of the family anyway. No one on my father's side believed her at all and openly said so. My sister and her boyfriend ended up moving in with her mother to save money, but she put them in the basement to keep her Airbnb running. And my sister started crying on social media that she couldn't live upstairs. I'm pretty sure the two of them were fighting with each other because all my sister did after that was complain online, and my mother barely posted anything on her social media anymore because of the previous stunt she tried. We have reached the end. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.